Welcome to readtheticker.com. Today we're going to re-look at Richard Wyckoff. Richard Wyckoff logic, born in the 1930s, has worked for 100 years and is still working today. Richard Wyckoff logic is the foundation for many well-known traders of our time. William J. O'Neill, Dan Zanger, who claims O'Neill's work is the Bible. You can find more information about those two via the website General Information. The point I'm trying to make is, learn the original source work before you learn the adjusted or the attempted improved work by others. readtheticker.com RTT Plus subscription has a private blog called RTT Wyckoff 2.0. This blog covers the live execution of the original Wyckoff logic as Richard Wyckoff would apply it, as best we possibly can. The knowledge used is sourced from education material provided by the late and renowned Wyckoff teacher, Bob Evans. You can learn more about Bob Evans via the site General Information, Bob Evans. This is a high-level summary of the Wyckoff trading world. I'll just bring it in close. Here we have an accumulation pattern. Here we have a reaccumulation pattern. Up the top we have a distribution pattern. After an accumulation pattern, the most desired entry is E3, which is basically a phase D execution of Wyckoff logic. E3 is the most desired entry because it appears after a sign of strength. A sign of strength highlights a change in behavior from the neutral zone of buying and selling or the previous zone of direct selling. So we've gone from direct selling to a neutral zone to a bias to buying based on the sign of strength. You only have confirmation that the stock will go higher after the bias has deliberately been moved into strength or bullishness. A sign of strength is a sign where price will rocket out of a trading range, come back for a test, and take on for higher prices. A test, what is a test? A test is a period of time where the sign of strength or the people buying the market will sell down to test to see if there's any more sellers around. They sell down to try and attract people to sell. Once it is known to them that the selling has dried up and there's no sellers around, they will mark up prices freely without any confrontation or any challenges. Once again, we get a reaccumulation pattern is where some challenges might come in, where people might begin to sell, but then once again we'll get a reaccumulation that might break, or most likely it will break into another sign of strength. And then we get E6, which is once again a preferred Wyckoff logic buy because it's after a sign of strength. A phase D is where a sign of strength appears in the phase structure of A, B, C, D, E, and the entry zone E3 and E6 on the long side and E3, E6 on the short side are the Wyckoff logic desired entry zones. Now, what do I mean by desired? Well, for example, yes, there might be a purchase after at E1 or E2, but you wouldn't commit a lot of capital if you're Richard Wyckoff. He would commit most capital or most allocation of funds to a position at E3 and E6. Now, in the modern day market, you might want to take advantage of E1 or E2. You may only execute 1 or 2% of your capital, whereas at E3 you might execute 5 to 10%. Or at E1 and E2 you might want to take a secure position by using an option spread where you can make money where it goes up or sideways. So yes, E1 and E2 are desired entry positions, but not as favoured as E3 or E6. So E5 and E4 is similar to E1 and E2. The main point I wish to highlight is that E3, E6 are the most desired entry positions for a Richard Wyckoff logic. It's the same on the short side. It's E3 and E6. It's the test after the sign of weakness on the short side, and on the long side, it's the test after the sign of strength. Main reason is, I'll just summarize again, you do not know the direction of the trend until a sign of strength is present. Before this, you are unsure, because back in the accumulation or in the trading range, bias is neutral. Until that bias changes and we get a change in behavior, a sign of strength confirms that the bias has swung to the bullish side. The first chance you get is an E3. After reaccumulation, you get an E6. Now, you must study this chart to understand that, but that's pretty much the short and curly of it. And here I just want to highlight, to make it even more blunter, the only way you can really profit in a market is you get a stepping pattern where price breaks resistance and forms a consolidation as it steps up to higher prices. Every consolidation is not the same, but you do need what is common is a sign of strength to break through resistance. It makes resistance support each time. So here you get a sign of strength here. This is a sign of strength ending here. Sign of strength ending there. A sign of strength ending there. Another sign of strength here. So for each step up, a sign of strength is a very common element of the trend. Just take a look at a recent example. Here we have Apple weekly chart. The W's are winners, the L's are losers, the red lines are resistance above a consolidation. Here we have accumulation. Here we have reaccumulation. Up the top here we have distribution. Here we have accumulation and reaccumulations. Let's just take a closer look. Here we have where the cursor is. You'll see a sign of strength breaking up a resistance. And the first week, negative week, turns out to be a test. It proves that there's no selling around, and then you get a markup process. We have a reaccumulation, and the first week turns out to be a test. These tests can be a bit tricky. They can be quite mild, like just a 1 week down, or it can be 2 or 3 weeks down. As you can see up, 1 week test is pretty common. One week test. Here we have a 2 week test. 1 week test here. Here we have a 1 week test that went into a 2 week test, and the 3rd week test was pretty much signed for alarm, and we all know what happened after that. We had a sign of strength up here, but what actually happened was that a sign of weakness actually turned up after it, where heavy selling crushed the strength on the other side, neutralized it. Here we have a first week of weakness after breakout of support, resistance, sorry. Here we had 3 weeks. Once again, a little bit more tricky, more than 1 week. 4 weeks, and the 5th week was a test we got, and then we obviously took off after that. And here we had a 1 week test. Of course, this trend up here was backed by new products and the taking over the world with new technology, iPhone and iPads. Here I think Steve Jobs passed away here and Peter Cook took over. Here was the challenge from Samsung and market share. Over here we have the trend which is pretty much spurned on hope of the buyback plans by Tim Cook. As you can see, the Wyckoff logic is still working in the modern day. Signs of strength are critical to show a change in behavior, that the bias has moved out of a neutral zone into the beginning of the markup phase. A sign of strength is always present when it busts out of accumulation or reaccumulation. And it's once again a Wyckoff logic trader would have seen a sign of strength out here, and he would have been very concerned to see such a strong selling on the test, because that really wasn't a test. The idea of a test is to be light selling to prove that there's no sellers around. When you get a test of elevated selling, you should be concerned. And if knowing the volume pattern, and as I remember the volume pattern on these 3 weeks in, there was much concern when you saw that this was not a light test, but rather very aggressive selling. Over here we had 1 week of light selling, so that was a reason to buy up. But then we probably had a little bit more confusion here. 3 down weeks was actually quite aggressive selling, so the confidence was not quite there until at least the 4th, 5th week of break of support. The selling had evaporated. Once at this zone here, the light weeks at selling here in the red weeks, down weeks, so that was confidence for the bulls to mark prices up. And then we entered a zone as we're waiting for the buybacks, and as you can sort of see, there was 4 or 5 weeks of selling, and there was much confusion. And then there was a final test or shakeout. They might even call that as minus spring. As you can sort of see, that we had to get confirmation that the buyback were actually going to happen. Then it was announced, and now we took up, and then we have 1 week of light selling. It proved that no sellers around, and we took off again. This is a sign of strength taking up here. As you can see, the sign of strength here was, very much challenged. Sign of strength here wasn't so bad. Minor selling. The truth about a sign of strength of markup, it should be a clear definition that buyers are in control and selling is weak. And this is all true all the way up here. Here we had a sign of strength, but the first challenge to it, it showed that the buyers weren't in control at the height at $700. Oh, this is after the split. It's now 110, I think it is $100. So the sign of strength was negated by more selling, so that really wasn't a sign of strength. It was really not proven to be that the bias had moved. Once again, like to say, Richard Wyckoff logic has been inherited into many other traders, and they've put their own name on it. Learn the source, understand how it works, and I believe you me, the next 20 or 30 years of your trading life will be well grounded. Thank you for watching.